working on my ground meat gravy. So I'm going to show you a little video on how I made the ground meat gravy. So let's look in the pot. So that's about 4 pounds of 80/20 ground beef. I'm using a big can of tomato paste and a little can of tomato paste, and then I will fill this tomato paste can with water twice. 2 cans of, excuse me, 2 cans of water with this big tomato paste. And then I might put a little more. So you're sort of just going to take the tomato paste out with the spoon and mix it in. Here, Steve, get into the close. And kind of mix it in so that it's like melted. You don't want to leave like big chunks of the tomato paste before you start adding the water. Okay, so what you're seeing here is the bigger can of tomato paste, the smaller can of tomato paste, and then I added 2 cans of water from the large can and 1 can of water from the smaller can. And so that's what the consistency would look like. Okay, so for this recipe I'm using parsley flakes, black pepper, salt, ground onion or granulated onion, granulated garlic, yeah, and then so that's all. So I don't put a ton of garlic in because, being honest, it kind of gives me a little bit of agita, but if you want to look to see, go ahead, Steve, show them how much garlic is in there. Not a lot, not a ton of garlic. But onion, on the other hand, I go a little ham on that. So there's lots of onion, which seems kind of crazy, but I bet that's maybe a 1/4 cup of onion. I put like a handful of salt. And depending on how spicy you like it, woo! I went a little crazy on the pepper, so I got to pull a little of the bit of that out. Otherwise, everyone's going to have a little bit of heartburn. Okay, so then I'll mix that around. Give it a sniff. It smells delicious. Okay. And since I took a little bit of that onion out, I'm going to put a little bit more back in. And honestly, I feel like you can't use too much onion. Okay. Put some parsley in there. And see, it's like super duper thick, but I'm going to be adding some sauce to it. Okay. So I have, come up here, Steve, 2 cans of this large, this is 29 ounces of tomato sauce, and so I'm just going to pour that right in. And then I'm going to kind of judge how thick it is, whether I maybe need a little bit more water, because when you cook gravy, it gets thicker. So this is pretty thick. So I think I'm going to add 1 more can of water to it. And I'll use the large can. So I just added 1 more large can of water. So that made 3 cans of water. And so I know, like, I'm making a giant gravy pot of this because I'm having a big Sunday dinner, but you can kind of judge and use like half the ingredients. And so, like, I would literally cook this. I mean, it's 7:45 in the morning. Probably going to cook it till about noon on low. We are going to be throwing some pieces of pork in there, shoulder, because Steve tells me you need to have fat or else it's not going to taste good. So I'm going to be cutting up some pork shoulder and throwing it in there and literally cooking it the whole day. And then I'm actually making lasagna with this, but my mother used to use shells, and she would call it ground meat gravy in shells. So this is how I make my ground meat gravy. Need to make sure you stir it so that it doesn't burn on the bottom. I use a gas stove and I keep it on a pretty low flame. So this is how I make, and my grandson's here, and this is how I make my ground meat gravy, or what other people call bolognese. Ground meat gravy, or it's in Italian, it's called a bolognese. Is that dumb? Should Should I say something else?